we went into Iraq and the war started. And I just each day went into my studio with either feelings inside me or external events. And so I just painted out how I felt. At this time, I had won a prize as Artist of the Month from a magazine called The Artists and Illustrators and was awarded £100 of art materials. I chose Sennelier chalk pastels, which I considered to be the Rolls-Royce of pastels for texture and bold colour, especially on dark pastel paper. During the period after my mother's passing, I experienced a chance meeting in a packed local cafe, sitting opposite a couple. The man was quite chatty, and before long, I was showing him the art magazine with my photo in as Artist of the Month. He asked me where that painting was, and I said, in my studio. And he said, okay, I'd like to buy it. Let's go there now. So, always up for a potential sale, I said goodbye to my friends and climbed into his car, stunned that anyone would offer to buy a painting without even seeing it in its true glory, or at least haggling over the price. Buying a painting, unlike purchasing a fridge or a washing machine, is normally a process approached very cautiously, I've noticed. What will my friends and family think of me? Am I marked for life? A fridge or washing machine can be replaced in 5 or 6 years. What of a painting? What will happen to it after my death? While we were driving to my studio, he told me that he was a 4th-generation Quaker and a publisher, and if he was to buy my painting, I should buy his latest Quaker publication, Silence of the Word. I hastily agreed and somehow relaxed, knowing he was a Quaker. He was only passing through London for the week, and I never saw him again. But what followed was exciting. When we got to the studio, I think it's fair to say that there was bedlam, as shelves were ransacked to see all my wares, and it was a feverish hour or so. Could we have the next slide, please, which is Celebration in Pink. Deed accomplished. The only thing unaccounted for was the payment. And so I had to stick with the couple until the final transaction had been completed. The paintings were now wrapped up and in the boot of his car. Luckily, I didn't have any plans for the evening, as on my way into the supermarket, where he hoped to get some cash, he invited me to join them for dinner, which I agreed to do. I felt somehow that this man was really living his life spontaneously and going with the flow, as was I, and we all enjoyed a great evening together in a house where he was staying for the weekend, surrounded by original paintings by Sir Stanley Spencer, great British artist. I ended up playing my guitar and singing and really sharing from my heart. Sometime later, when I read his pamphlet, Silence of the Word, it resonated. I'd found no words since my mother's death to express my feelings, as my paintings had been my words. There was a link here somewhere, I believed, but I did not gain this information from my logical mind, more from a deep place within. So I decided to go to my first Quaker meeting in August 1998, after having read my new friend's pamphlet, and I have been going ever since. And if we can have the slide In My Prism, a self-portrait, please. Thank you very much. The silent meeting for worship appealed, as did the Quaker principle of that of God within. It has, however, taken some years for me to become aware that my true or authentic self, that of God within, is a meeting place for my personal, spiritual, creative and therapeutic self to unite, somewhere deeper than the ego, and where eventually freedom can be found. And the slide now of the female resurrection. As I was coming to terms with the death of my mother, and 4 other women also, some of them my own age, I was questioning how one could celebrate life while at the same time experiencing a plethora of females around me dying. Maybe a part of me was dying also. At this time, I inherited a large blank canvas, some 7 by 5 foot in size, and with this in mind, I decided to put the female on the cross in a sort of crucifixion scene. I think I was also marking spiritual crossover in my life, that linked many aspects of my authentic self that lay beyond words. This created tremendous guilt for me, as I felt a traitor to my own cultural heritage, and that I was betraying my roots by putting myself, like Jesus, on the cross. And as if that wasn't upsetting enough, in my research on the symbol of the cross, I found that the Aramaic root of Jesus is my name, Isa. Oh my God. I had a vague idea that there would be 3 female figures, but allowed the painting to paint itself, if you like. What my original concept did not envisage was that the central figure would transcend while I was in the process of painting her. Her head was nowhere to be seen off the canvas. This was a miracle indeed. And so I called the painting The Female Resurrection, a transcendent image of suffering and transformation. The figure on the left, looking into a sort of conch, was the face of reflection, and the other on the right of the painting, a dark figure wearing the crown of thorns, but decidedly dancing into the painting. And so I had my answer, that within the suffering or the shadow was also the celebration and the possibility of transformation. Around 2002 or 2003, I exhibited in some 5 solo exhibitions and sold many paintings. It was a very exciting time after having produced some 450 of them, but I was realizing that the intensity of my journey was fast failing me, and I had nowhere else to go but to share my story and close the door on my studio and open the door onto the world. But I did not know how. I could not put any of this into words, but just followed my spirit, as I had done in the past, and trusted that all would be fulfilled in the fullness of time. I found myself becoming aware of an unopened door from an earlier period in my life. That certificate course in arts and therapy that I had almost participated in some 10 years prior, it had now become a diploma and master's course, which was 4 years part-time. I didn't know how it would fare on such a journey, but I was interested to make sense of my extraordinary creative and spiritual life experiences, and thought the course might fill some gaping holes in my personal life, the personal blank canvas. However, without an A-level to my name, facing a master's course was more than daunting at the age of 55. The dean assured me that if I could tick the boxes of prior accredited learning, I could apply to do it. And so it was. I was granted a place on this master's course, a complete novice to academia. I failed my first essay, as I failed another 5 assessments. I remember doing my first case presentation as a performance, thinking that I should get a round of applause at the end of it. Instead of this, there was a deathly silence, and the examiner asked me what my thinking was, to which I had none. She pulled me aside afterwards and said I looked like a rabbit caught in the headlights. I realized that my approach to things was instinctive, and if I was to get through this course, I would have to learn about structure, evidence, and making an academic argument about comparative theories, all very scary, untapped organizational formations that were yet to be found within my humble, as yet virginal, but curious mind. Many people veer towards the more structured, organized part of the brain, so-called left brain function, and I move towards the right brain function, instinctive, creative, abstract. My peers, mainly much younger than I, and high achievers in the main, could not fathom how I could carry on with my studies with so many failures to my credit. I was working through my academic demons, which were rife from the past, and reassured myself that as I was being partly funded, I would not be able to pay back the huge fees, so I had to carry on. But I think more importantly, I was learning on the job. On failing my second clinical exam for being too eclectic, I was very near failing overall, and another clinical exam failure would mean that I would be off the MA. I was in serious trouble and decided to reach out to the dean, who had called me aside some time before as being an enigma to him. He wanted more visibility from me and asked me how likely it would be for me to ask for help if I needed it on a scale of 0 to 10. I said 6. He said he thought that was a bit high, and I felt the tears well up. Now was the time to reach out, and I did. Had I not had this earlier meeting with him, I might have remained totally lost in my world of failure. What did I need to do to get through the course? I was stumped. 2 hours went by in the large orange rococo room where I met with the dean and the head of studies, drank numerous cups of tea, and wrestled with the confusion of what was required of me to get through this course. Some sort of clarity emerged, whereby they wanted to understand where I was coming from, what were my particular standpoints and theoretical underpinnings. Be compulsive, I was told, go to conferences in the areas of my specialized interests, which in my own case was an inspiration, as I was motivated by areas of my deepest wounding in the area of early maternal neglect and the impact of that on attachment throughout life and the belonging or not belonging to self in relation to that absence. I felt very contained within these parameters and more grounded as to how to proceed. In my final Viva presentation, and not without a blip beyond my control caused by the examiners who had to leave the room, I passed with a distinction and finally got my master's with an overall merit. So I was now a MAM, MA with merit. Wow, is all I can say to that. So if we could have the digital images of existing in the void, whilst I was waiting for the results of my master's, each day on my computer, I would do some digital images just to create something about this time and date it as I was waiting and waiting. And finally, on the 11th of October, if we can show that final one, was the day I received my master's. It's a pass, 11th of October, 2010. And now we have the blank canvas, decade 6 for better or worse, which is energy release, aliveness, authentic connection. There are no mistakes, only learning. Trust your inner voice. Failure turns to success. Acknowledgement, validation, spiritual connection. Close one door, another opens. Asking for help.
And we have Amanda raising hands. Please unmute yourself, Amanda.
Yes, Isa, thank you for all of the discussions to date now. Earlier, you were talking about Buddhism, and I was wondering if there was a specific point or event that inspired you to turn to Buddhism. And then just to go further, was it a friend, Sabina maybe, or what made you at home with Buddhism that you just didn't have before?
Well, basically, I think there was a lot of change when I started going to writing groups, and there I met a male friend who was a Buddhist, and he invited me to go to the Hampstead Buddhist group. And it was so intimate, and the monks and the nuns coming into this small room and sharing with us, on a very intimate level. It was a complete innovation just to see them sitting and not precious at all, but just the faces and the joy and this inner smile that I picked up, and the way they touched objects. It's more than the teaching, it was more the visual seeing of the monks and nuns. And there was another part to your question as well.
No, I think you actually, well, I guess I think you've answered it really, because I just said, who introduced you, and you mentioned the male friend, and then I asked what made you at home with it that you didn't have before, but I think that you've kind of answered that already.
Yeah, it was fantastic experience. Yeah.
And what age were you?
I was then about 40, 42.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Today we are fighting with technical problems. It's
Oh,
frozen.
really?
But anyway, we are strong and going. Decade 7. It's open on the screen with your gorgeous Rabbi's daughter painting.
Okay, I've just got to get to get away from the exit full screen. That's it. Okay. Right, so we're on to decade 7 now, speaking from the heart. 2008 to 2018. The beginning of this next decade sees me sporting my cap and gown and attending my graduation ceremony, a miracle indeed. I had never consciously thought about a career as a psychotherapist because as far as I was concerned, I was doing an MA in me, trying to fill in the gaps where I had become lost, reclaiming and understanding how I had become lost, and in so doing, find some answers. However, almost 15 years into my psychotherapeutic practice, I find that it has been a fascinating and illuminating experience. For, as I see it, keeping our struggles out of reach is the real problem. For when we dare to have the courage to look closely at our inner world, we can begin to heal and redress falsities that have produced distorted thinking and beliefs. Just taking a glass of water. If the child's need for spontaneous expression has been suppressed to adapt to the family environment, then it is likely that they also lose a significant part of their true self in the process. So loss and isolation become loud in the adult's inner world as the unique life force is crying out to find a voice. In some cases, where the parent meeting the child's developmental needs for mirroring has not been met, they may develop a false self. Like animals, we humans have basic needs to be loved, stroked, taken care of, reassured, and soothed when feeling troubled by being physically close to the mother. If the mother, parent, or primary caregiver, for whatever reason, is not able to meet the child's basic needs in this respect, the child learns to adapt to a false set of conditions that bypass the basic human needs. For example, if they were asked to be silent, be good, be brave, don't cry, the child interprets a "you're not special enough to be loved" inner voice, which is contrary to their natural needs. And so the inner child grows up out of sorts in a way, outwardly appearing grown up, but inwardly traumatized and unable to meet life's challenges head on without some sort of mental torment, since meeting the new as a necessary developmental stage has never happened. The script from this false self is that to be invisible and hide is the name of the game, the success, and all the gifts and richness that make up the true self remain hidden in a deeply held core belt of shame. In my work with clients, I spend time developing a trusting and safe relationship so that the client can start to live and breathe again as they step into the gaps of their own blank canvases. A stage has been created within which the true self can exist at long last, and therefore a truer picture can be painted. The stage is set in which the damaging impact of the false, critical, controlling, and neglectful self, which becomes internalized, can at last be seen for what it is, and the process of mindfully dismantling these false beliefs can be activated. Once the client can start to see these different parts playing out inside themselves, they can learn to adopt a more observant part of themselves in order to change the critical and negative voices and foster an altogether more nurturing and compassionate tone. This is far from being easy work, but the lost child within the adult can become alive again, free and liberated, much as I learned to do through my painting process. I find while working with clients that I'm in the flow of life. This is facilitating a space for others to become more aware of themselves in the present, and so enable the possibility of positive change and transformation within my clients' lives. This being in the now also connects to my Buddhist practice of mindfulness and the Quaker reference to that of God in everyone, space for a truthful, heartfelt connection with oneself. While I was studying for my MA, I was invited to exhibit in a solo exhibition at the Ben Uri Gallery in London. The paintings I exhibited were very much along my authentic journey of identity, of becoming my true self, and showing a range of paintings that reflected my journey and was entitled My Journey into Belonging. And if we could have the painting of the rabbi's daughter, and also after that, Memory to My Roots after Kittai. And these are my words to go with that exhibition. I identify as a Jew ancestrally, culturally, and creatively through my Eastern European roots, in particular the Eastern European artists of the early and mid-20th century. I identify as a survivor of the intergenerational trauma that links me to my personal heritage, in the grandparents I never knew, my parents who loved in the wake of their unexpressed traumas, and all the victims of abusive regimes of power, where the lessons of the Holocaust remain unlearnt. I identify as a Jew, belonging to the family of not belonging. I remain a wandering Jew to any label that restricts personal journeying and discovery, that could upset the status quo of a fundamentalist and rigid system of control, whether it be religious, spiritual, racial, familial, relational, or political. Having peace of mind is freedom. I now allow my difficult feelings to exist within. As Eckhart Tolle says in The Power of Now, an emotion has a very short lifespan. It is like a momentary ripple or wave on the surface of your being. When you are not in your body, an emotion can survive inside you for days. And I would add, or a lifetime, unless understood through self-knowledge and a compassionate self-acceptance. This is not an easy journey, as M. Scott Peck writes in his book, The Road Less Traveled, about the therapeutic journey. One of my first art teachers wrote this about me, and I think she caught my essence very well. You have a quasi-simple, quasi-complex artistic nature with a gift for receptiveness and guidance. Your work is buoyant, expressive, vigorous, and beautifully unself-conscious. Whatever you do, and however you do it in the future, maintain your individuality, choosing the colors, shapes, textures, and subject matter that inspire you towards self-expression. Your artwork will probably combine very successfully with your music and poetry and the creative nature of your work. Disregard any preconceptions of artists. Just do it. You have no one to answer to except an unidentified muse called freedom. Every now and then, set yourself a little exercise, e.g., draw a piece of crumpled paper for discipline. You do need some parameters. This mirroring of my true self, a sense of all-out personal aliveness or feeling real, was hidden to me in all other ways, but through my creative expression. And it is with gratitude that I had that possibility of connection. But now, 25 years on, I have retrieved that lost child, excuse me, in my deepest sense of being. And this is a quote from Heidi Hinder Chadwick. The more we shine out in all our human bitter sweetness, the more the fire of that light burns away the shame that causes us to hide. Shame is what keeps us in the dark, cowering, judging, and believing we are not enough. When we embody and speak our truth, that's when we are in our divinity, our freedom, liberation, spaciousness. And so finally, for better or worse, in decade 7, in the blank canvas, allowing uncomfortable feelings to emerge, they're just feelings, not knowing and finding the right path, learning through others, finding my own maternal feelings, feelings of belonging to myself, validating that I have something to offer others, feeling in the right place, getting helpful feedback, allowing feelings of loneliness. They are normal and human, enjoying solitude. Anything coming from that?
I'm looking. I think we are all good.
Okay.
I think you are also saying, I'm fighting. We are about to finish on the presentation and recording. We catch up. I'm sorry for the technical delays, you know, sometimes coming up. And we are on decade 8 with
Yes.
gorgeous photograph of you.
A decade 8.
Yes.
Yes. So 2018 to the present. At the beginning of this decade, theatre returns into my life, having fallen away some 30 years ago, and I attend some theatre workshops on Susie Orbach's book, Fat as a Feminist Issue, which was written in the 1980s. And we improvised with a mixed age group of women to see how issues had changed or not around body image, food, and self-esteem with the emergence of social media. Not a pretty sight for younger women nowadays who are lacking in self-confidence, and who isn't as a teenager, with also this need to fit in with the advertised perfect manufactured body shape. Around this time, I received a call from one of Sabine's exes, who I hadn't seen for 20 years, to tell me of Sabine's unexpected death. And she and I arranged to meet at Sabine's funeral. Sabine and I had spoken some 2 months prior to this, and our friendship had finally fallen apart by this time. But I wanted to pay tribute to the very real significance of this relationship in my life. I knew that Sabine had exes everywhere, as it was easier to be an ex than a partner. But little did I realize that one of the participants in the show I was rehearsing was also one of Sabine's exes, and she was amazed when I told her of Sabine's death. Here we are, the cast of How Am I Looking Now? If we can have that slide. It was a musical, outrageous, serious, and meaningful show with Susie Orbach attending a number of our performances, questions and answer sessions after some shows that we performed in fringe theatres in the area of North London. Then climate crisis takes its strength at the beginning of this decade, with the emergence of Greta Thunberg and a song that I wrote that I mentioned some decades ago, 50 years ago actually. It becomes the song of the time, although when I wrote it, I had no idea about climate change. But I was invited to sing it, as I say, in the UK's Parliament during a protest aimed at our supposed leaders. Then we have the remarkable Brexit, which no one would have thought could happen, followed by the coronavirus pandemic, which also no one would have believed could have happened during our lifetime, and time, let alone stop the world in its tracks. But it has. We have all had to look at our blank canvases to take stock and reflect on our lives and what can be done differently. Inevitable changes will follow, but I'm very grateful to technology that has allowed me to take my conversations with the blank canvas to a global audience and to share my story with you. I leave you with this thought in mind, that all loose threads lead somewhere. We can never know. It's all, as I see it, a magical mystery tour. And if we could have the front cover image, and that is my presentation.
Yes, we have it on the screen with beautiful front cover of our book. We thank you so much, Isa. It was a gorgeous journey And thank you so much for sharing us, walk through all the path of these decades.
My pleasure.
I'm closing the recording. So